Hey guys, welcome back. We are going live again for a second time in about a week. Hopefully, you guys are enjoying it. We're gonna take just a minute just to make sure everything's functioning well, make sure everybody's on here. Okay, cool. Looks like our audio, visual, and all that's all good. Cool, awesome. All right, so welcome, guys. So we're gonna basically take you guys' questions. So you guys are guiding this. You guys are letting me know what it is you guys want answered. So please do post your questions in the chat. While we're waiting for those first questions, quick announcement. We are, by the way, questions are on online dating, ideally, please. And speaking of online dating, we do have the online dating bootcamp, which enrollment is closing today. The program, the actual course, the classes will start on Sunday, which is 2 days from now. So definitely want to get in there. And we're closing enrollment because obviously the class is starting. We want to get everybody in before the class starts. We want everybody to have the same experience. So go over to toddvonline.com. Last chance to get in for that program. You're not going to want to miss out on that. So with that said, let's get into the questions that you guys have. Oh, by the way, quick thing on that program, what it is, and I didn't actually tell you guys what it is essentially me guiding you by the hand every step of the way through online dating. One of the most important parts being that I will sit down with you personally and we'll actually write your profile and figure out your photos together. So that part we'll doing one-on-one from the very start. And then we'll have 6 weeks of ongoing courses in crazy depth about how to do everything else online. So that's what that program is, just so you know. Okay. And again, that's toddvonline.com. Okay. So here are the questions you guys have. Let's see what we got here. All right. Steve asks, I got a number on Tinder, but couldn't go on a date with her for another week. The conversation died and she ended up flaking. How do I keep conversations warm over multiple days without being needy and messaging her too much? Yeah, this is tough. This is actually one of those really tough things with just dating in general, right? What happens when girl wants to make a date, you want to make a date, but you have this time lag. And the first solution to this situation is don't get in this situation, okay? So in general, do not set dates days and days and days in advance. That tends to bite you in the ass because you're in this weird situation where it's like, okay, if I don't message her for a week, it looks really weird and then it looks really needy when I actually do message her. And especially when I message, not after not messaging for a week, I message in the messages to confirm the date. How much more needy could you get than that? And how much more of an agenda could you get? So that's really problematic. On the other hand, if you've already made plans and then you're just trying to hold the conversation for a week with like small talk, well, now all this positive momentum you had and all the sexual tension is just being dissipated and it's almost anticlimactic, and that's not good either. So what do you do? What I like to do is this. Number one, try and set your dates day of or next day if you can, or 2 days at most. Okay, you don't want to be setting dates a week in advance. That's the first thing. Second thing, if you do set the date far in advance, and even if you don't set the date far in advance, don't leave every detail of the date already determined. So if I have a date 7 days in the future, I don't want that date to be, we're going to this restaurant on this day at 7:00 and I'm picking you up, here. I don't want that. That's way, way, way too detailed. And it feels like an obligation almost. But also it leaves you nothing else to discuss. Instead, what I would want to have is like maybe something vague like, hey, let's get together probably after work on Friday. Then you can still send another text later to figure out the work schedule or to discuss work schedules and what will work. You can send another text to discuss, I was thinking one of these 2 restaurants, which do you like, right? And then you can send one more text to kind of like maybe confirm and iron out some final things. So by keeping some text in reserve, you don't necessarily have to send all those texts. By keeping those texts in reserve, though, you have some things to text over the course of that coming week. And because you have those things to text, you can basically, you can have an excuse to text. You have a reason to text. And then you can add in some flirtation, add in some banter along with that. But it's not just pointless banter and it's not actually taking the conversation backwards because it's still related to the plans, which again is the focus of all messaging and pretty much everything you're doing online. So keep some messages in reserve rather than having it all out there. And then you're going to want to use the general format, which we talk about a lot in messaging in the course. And I talk about a lot in messaging in general, which is that when you're getting relatively logical things or you're dealing with like factual stuff in the real world, you want mixed messages where part of your message deals with the logical factual part and then part of your message is flirtatious or man to woman. So those are the ways I would handle that particular situation. But the best thing is don't end up in that situation. Don't end up in the situation where you have a date a week out that's firmly planned with no text in reserve, because then, yeah, everything you send is a little needy or weird. There's not really a good text to send in that circumstance. So avoid the circumstance altogether. All right, next question from Amir. Is it always better to get someone off the dating app quickly and risk getting an I don't give my number right away? Okay, so here I'm going to refer you to one of the general lessons in game, which I've done a specific video about, which is get rid of the words always or never in your game. So basically, I'll answer any question on this document that has the word always or never in it with a no, just in advance. And I'll be 99% correct. 99% of the time, I'll be correct to just answer that with a no, right? I mean, you can say like, are you always like, are you always the male in your male female relationship? Yes, you are, as long as you haven't had a sex change, right? But like for the most part, like there aren't too many alwayses in dating. So is it always better to get someone off the dating app quickly? No, not always, but probably 90% of the time, yes. Right. And if by getting them off the dating app you mean get them onto a phone number, get them onto a date, yes, it is always better to get them off than not. Right. Now sometimes there may be some weird cases where where maybe you need more comfort and you could go for the close, but you wait, right? So let me put it this way. You want to go as quickly as you can, but no quicker. All right. So it's almost always, it's quite generally better to get them off the app than not. However, that doesn't mean you should ask to get them off the app with the first message, right? Because there's a difference between when you ask to get them off the app and when you get them off the app. So you should get them off the app pretty much as soon as they're ready to get off the app and onto a phone number, onto a date. That's going to generally be the case. Again, don't use the word always, but vast majority of the cases, that's going to be the case. However, that doesn't mean pushing for it, right? So when should you try and get them off the app? When they're ready to. How do you know when they're ready to? Well, you know they're ready to based on the feedback they're giving you, based on how they're responding to your messages, based on how much buy-in they're showing, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, always or never. First of all, that's just, don't think always or never in dating. Dating is not black and white. Dating is not an always or never thing. All right. Every situation merits its own consideration. But in general, you do want to get them off the date, or sorry, off the app and onto a date, off the app and onto the phone number. But as soon as they're ready to, not as soon as the first message or as soon as you would like them to be ready to. You have to actually calibrate and pay attention to the girl herself. All right, next question from Hank, which is spelled in a very non-American way. It's like a European Hank. Anyway, hey Todd, do you think you can alter your profile towards intelligent, athletic girls, or is it better to stick with one type? Well, I resent the insinuation that an intelligent girl can't be athletic and an athletic girl can't be intelligent. In my experience, I've found that both of them correlate together, right? Typically, if a girl's smart enough, she'll at least be in decent shape. Typically, girls who are in decent shape, I don't know if that increases their IQ, but it does increase their work ethic and their practical intelligence and maybe their education level. So I don't think it's an either or to begin with between these two. But the question is, I guess along the lines of how much can you calibrate to a particular specific type of girl? With respect to that, here's what I'll say. I'll say that, let's say that I'm going to use my hands as an example. There's a range of behaviors, but there's a range between my hands that is good game. And this is for a variety of traits. It can be for how polarizing you're being, for how sexual you're being, how fast you're advancing, how much you're being high value versus more comfort based. It can be for a variety of things, but so for whatever attribute you're conveying, whatever thing you're conveying about yourself, whatever piece of the interaction you're dealing with, there's a range typically that is good game. And this is too much, it's outside the range. This is too little, it's outside the range. Anything in this range is good game. So within that range, there's different places you can hit that will be more or less acceptable to a particular girl. So if this is the range of, let's say, value versus comfort. Okay, so this is high value, high comfort. And this is too much comfort, you're boring, too much value, you're scary, etc. Now, for a party type girl, you're going to be at the high value end of the range over here. For a more like demure, sweet, less sexually experienced girl, maybe you're going to be more towards the end of the comfort range over here. But you're not going to go over here. You're not going to go so far that it's bad game, and you're not going to go so far that it's bad game. So you're going to be somewhere in that range. And so you can adjust within that range based on blueprints. So if you think that a certain girl needs a more intelligent and more sort of I don't know, not sophisticated, that's not the right word, needs a more intelligent and more stable kind of approach to game, then maybe you go towards that end of the range, but you don't go outside the range because that's bad game. If you think that a girl needs a more wild, adventurous thing, then you go towards that end of the range, but not outside of it. So if you want girls that are more athletic, you can definitely throw in some stuff in your game about you being athletic. You can definitely throw in some stuff about like expectations about the gym and expectations about her staying fit, staying healthy, etc. But you don't want to go so far about it that you seem like an obsessed nut and that you become unattractive or you become like, hypersensitive to things or whatever. Same kind of thing with intelligence. You can definitely add more educated, sophisticated things into your game. Excuse me. But you don't want to go so far that you're now a robot and not a human being. You don't want to go so far that you seem fake. You don't want to go so far that you seem uptight, right? So you want to stay within the range of good game, but you can cater within that range to a particular end of the range. Okay, this is a really interesting question. This is going old school from Jason. Does it make sense to peacock on an online profile, or would it be seen as weird? This is a fascinating question. I don't think I've ever been asked this question about online. So congratulations, Jason, on asking me something new. So that's good job. In terms of this answer, about peacocking, you first need to understand kind of how peacocking works. Excuse me, I got like spilled on myself a little bit. Okay, you need to understand how peacocking works and when it doesn't work and what the kind of premise of it is. The idea of peacocking is that it's meant to get attention, right? That's it, basically. It's meant to get you attention. And in doing so, the idea is that once you have that attention, you can handle that attention well and deflect whatever negativity may come with it. It gives you a platform to convey your personality. The other idea is that by peacocking, you convey that you're able to take certain social sort of stresses, right? So if someone's giving you shit and you can pass shit tests, you're conveying that. You're also conveying that in the past you've been able to pass shit tests because you can dress in an outlandish manner. So all of those are positive things. And this whole idea of getting attention also does apply in an online profile, right? There's a reason why we are polarizing online, and that's to get attention. However, on an online profile versus live, you can't respond immediately. So in a live circumstance, if you get some girl's attention and her immediate response is "what a fucking idiot," but it's a "what a fucking idiot" where she is engaging with you and she has to say it, and then you're able to be not a fucking idiot. You're able to be really cool and really pass the shit test well, be very charismatic. You can turn it around very, very quickly. And so you can go much further into the realm of guy I wouldn't think of dating, but he gets my attention, and turn it around in a live setting because you're there live. Online, that's less the case because you're not going to whatever impression she has. She's going to have that impression, and then she may take the time and energy to message you, but it's a much more kind of an investment, much harder for you to do message you than to just say something live. And then you're going to have this time lag before you respond. And in your response, you can only respond with verbals. You can't respond with your nonverbals and how non-reactive you're being. She can only go off the text of the words, etc. So the answer to this question is it depends what you mean by peacocking. If by peacocking you mean going overtly, blatantly weird to get attention, it's probably not going to work very well in online because you're doing more damage to her perception of you as the boyfriend she thinks she's looking for than you are doing in terms of gaining attention. However, doing something that just stands out a little bit, but is maybe in a cool way or in a debatably cool way could work. I would say that better than peacocking is being a little more edgy and polarizing in general, but not violating the archetype or stereotype of what she thinks is an attractive guy. That's probably generally a better approach to how to get attention because you're going to be able to recover from it better. However, light peacocking could be fine. So if you take what's already a stylish look and you add a little flair to it so that it's clearly still stylish, but just a little, you've made it your own or a little unique or pique some curiosity, that might be the ideal, but that's not extreme peacocking. That's like very slight, very minor peacocking. So hopefully that answers your question. You do want to get attention, but you want to get attention you don't want to go as far away from the girl's perception of what she thinks she wants in online game as you would live because you can't recover it as quickly or can't recover it as well. And because her impressions are a little more cemented. Also, the mindset a girl's in when doing live game is more logical a little bit than it would be if she's out at a nightclub or in a live interaction with a guy that's like very, she's feeling a lot of emotions. If a girl's sitting on her couch, she's kind of like leisurely swiping through guys, she's in a different emotional state. And in that state, she's a little bit less likely to respond to something outlandish than she is to respond to more of her stereotypes of what she thinks is an attractive guy. So you want to play close enough to the stereotypes, but also get attention. That's kind of the mix you're going for. And if you're too outlandish, that can definitely, bite you in the ass. Okay, next question from Amir. Should you show less investment if she asks to reschedule, assuming that would keep me high value in the convo, ? Okay, so what basically the answer here is how do you respond when a girl asks to reschedule? So you have a date with a girl, she asks to reschedule. And this is not really a complete question because it really depends on the nature of the thing, right? So there's various reschedules. There's the reschedule where you have a plan and she contacts you like a day in advance and lets you know there's a legitimate thing that came up. And she suggests, why don't we do another time? And she tries to reschedule. If she does that, I would not like punish or be aloof or anything like that. I would just be like, cool. And I would actually take that as a very positive thing. Whenever a girl has to reschedule an online date and actually cares enough to follow through and do the rescheduling and make that next date, that means she's into you. That means it's good. And also, she was courteous enough to let you know, life happens. And a lot of guys are like this, like, I need to be a priority in her life. That's fine once you're her boyfriend. But if you're a guy online that she's never met, how do you expect to be a priority yet? And just because you're not a priority right now doesn't mean you won't be once she gets to know you, right? You start off with like, she likes you enough to X, right? She likes you enough to message you. She likes you enough to respond to multiple messages. She likes you enough to invest in the messaging. She likes you enough to go on a date. She likes you enough to kiss you. She likes you enough to have sex with you. She likes you enough to get into a relationship with you. So she likes you enough to X. And just because she likes you enough to X right now doesn't mean she won't like you enough to Y later, right? It doesn't mean that that doesn't change over time. It absolutely does. But as long as the girl was courteous, rescheduled, actually, let you know in advance, didn't mess with your schedule, respected your time, and gave you an option to reschedule, that's awesome. I would actually treat that as it's not as good as if she just came on the date, but it's almost as good, right? And in some ways, it's almost better, even though it's not, right? In the sense that if that same girl came on the date, you're still better off. But the girl that will actually go to the length of making plans and making sure they happen is probably a better lead than the girl who just came on a date with you because she had nothing better to do. So in that sense, that's a kind of like change of plans that I don't mind at all. On the other hand, there's the change of plans where the worst case would be you have the plan, you show up, she doesn't even let you know that she's not coming, and she just full stands you up. That's a different thing because that girl just fully wasted your time. It was truly inconsiderate. And also she showed no desire, to make the plan or to remake the plan or something like that. So a girl like that, would I get angry? No, because getting angry isn't helping. Getting angry is just making more stress hormones in your body. It doesn't fucking matter to her. Clearly, she doesn't care about what you think about her, or she would have shown up on the date or would have called you or something. So getting angry to punish her only punishes yourself. However, getting angry aside, you should also be smart. And you should understand this girl's a bit of a flake. This girl wasted my time once. And so one, I'm going to kind of put her at the bottom of the hierarchy. So you should have at any time like a hierarchy or a funnel of girls that are interested in you and you're interested in. And so if this girl was really hot and she was at like the top of the funnel, we're going to make a date with her, and she did this, well, now she goes to maybe like 7th position on the funnel or something like that, or 10th position or whatever. And now you're going to prioritize other girls ahead of her. So if she tries to make plans with you again, and there's one girl that's higher in the hierarchy trying to make plans, she gets, ignored for the higher in the hierarchy girl. She has become less of a priority for you. Also, specifically, aside from just putting less effort into making plans with her, when I do make plans with her, I'm going to be a little careful to make sure the plans are not something where I can get burnt again. So if a girl stood me up once, by the way, if a girl stands you up once, you're probably done with her because she just go far enough down the hierarchy. But let's say the girl just, did something in the middle, like canceled, let you know, but didn't try and suggest plans, and it's kind of annoying, and it's kind of maybe a short notice cancellation, but it seems relatively valid. Well, I would make a note and I'd be like, well, this girl, has canceled in the past. So when I make plans with her, I want to make plans that if she cancels, it will not affect me very much. So if she cancels, like maybe you make plans right near your house so it's not a huge inconvenience, or maybe you just invite her along to something you're doing anyway, so that if she doesn't come, you don't even care. But you're still open to meeting up with her because she just canceled once, and sometimes life happens. So there's a whole range there. The big thing though is be smart about it rather than emotional about it. Like don't start thinking the girl owed you something because she didn't. But you can start think that if she's a discourteous person or uninterested, that does lower her kind of value as a lead, and you should act accordingly. You should also not get burnt by the same mistake twice. So if she didn't show up once, be a little bit more cognizant of how you schedule the date in the first place. That said, in general, with all girls, you should be scheduling dates in such a way that if they do occasionally flake, you're not too put out. So that's not even that big of an adjustment if you're doing things right in the first place. Okay, next question from Felix or Felix, depending what part of the world he's from. Says, as a beginner, I'm in my head a lot, so I'm worried that we'll run out of things to say on a date. How do I always have something at least decent to say that I don't have to fear this? All right, so how do you have something to say on a date? Okay, sorry about the ear thing, but I promise you get better answers if I'm not thinking about how much my ear itches rather than thinking about the question. All right, so basically the question is, how do you have something to say on a date if you're not very good at your verbals, you're not very confident, you're a little nervous? I'll tell you something that I used to do, not so much on, actually, I did this on dates too, kind of in a way. I did this more on phone calls, but I actually did this on dates too. So what I would do on phone calls when I was first learning phone game and I was nervous about not having something to say is I would show up for the call to the extent that you do show up for an audio call. And I would have a plan of a story in my back pocket. So I'd get on the call and I would plan on just talking to the girl and just going with whatever came up. However, if it I called and she was kind of awkward or nervous or there wasn't anything or the conversation was going dead, I'd have, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened to me today, and then I'd tell a quick story. And so I knew I had this one story in my back pocket, and that made me more confident, more relaxed. It probably helped me not need the story as much because I was being more charismatic. And then also when I did need the story, it was there for me. I also used to do the same thing on dates. And this was more because I grew up in like the canned game era of game where people were like using routines and using scripts and stuff like that. And so I had a little notebook I would keep in my back pocket with a bunch of lines, routines, and scripts. And the reason I had it in my back pocket was mainly because whenever something interesting happened, I was jotting it down as a potential material. But I did have it in my pocket. So if I was on a date and I had this thing in my back pocket and I ran out of things to say, I would excuse myself and be like, hey, I have to use the restroom. I'll be right back. Go to the bathroom. I'd flip through and be like, oh, here's some stories I could tell. Oh, there's this story, there's this story, there's this bit, there's this line. And I'd come back and I'd be confident and prepared and have this backup material. So I think it's completely fine to have material. The key idea, though, is you want to have it as backup material. Generally, whatever you come up with in the moment and whatever is actually related and calibrated to the girl in front of you is going to be better content. Whereas the content that you came up with in advance and it's good content but uncalibrated or unrelated to whatever's going on is going to be less effective as content. So you want that to be your backup plan, not your main plan. But having something in reserve, especially if you're nervous and you think that just getting over the nerves will help, is absolutely useful. So I definitely don't mind having a few stories in the can. Okay. This is a really, really easy question to answer. It says, what are good characteristics of a first photo? There are different strategies for a first photo. For most guys, the characteristic of a first photo is it makes you look as physically good as possible, specifically in the face. That's it. For most cases and most guys, your first photo should be the best headshot you've ever had taken. Right. And even to the extent of like it's worth it to hire a professional to take a headshot, etc. That's for most people. There are some cases that you can do different things. And in that case, the different thing, the key idea would be to get the attention enough that they look at the other photos. Like I do know a friend of mine who for a while he had a picture that was like a Photoshop picture of him like riding a cartoon dragon or something like that in the photo. And it was just bizarre enough and strange enough that the girl had to look further. And so that kind of worked. And then he somehow had some, I don't know what was in his profile, but he somehow was congruent with that or something. And he was able to make it work. And so that photo got attention for a different reason. And there may be other things you can do if you have a particular area of excellence or a particular area where you really stand out, you may be able to sell that in the first photo. But for I'd say 95 to maybe 99% of guys, say 95, your first photo basically should just be the best headshot you've ever had taken. It just is meant to make you look as physically good as possible. It's meant for the girl's sort of instinctual biological nature to think, oh, this is a hot guy and click on you. If you're not super, super attractive, the same still stands, except instead of trying to make it up with make yourself hot and attractive with jawline and whatever other like aesthetic biological factors you may have, instead you're going to do it with style, with being well dressed, being well kempt, having the photo shot well, having good kind of posture and angle and attitude in the photo, so that you hit her archetype of an attractive guy. But the point is, it's the photo of probably your face, but the photo of you in terms of look, style, whatever, that where you just look your physical most attractive. That is the simple, best way to handle a first photo for almost all people in almost all cases. All right. Cool. If a girl wants to go on dates with like boyfriend and girlfriend, but you just want to hook up at home, what's a good way to set relationship expectations? This is not really particularly an online dating question. So I'm going to answer it kind of briefly. But I'll just give kind of some general tips, which is that the best way to set relationship expectations is as early as possible, to an extent, but fully you set these expectations after sex, right? You don't want to be massively incongruent. Like you don't want to promise a girl one thing and then deliver something completely else. You don't want to promise her marriage before sex and then be like, hey, babe, let's just hang out once a week and never leave the house together. That's not going to fly really well. But understand that once you have had sex with a girl, once you've slept with a girl, your relative power in the relationship increases dramatically. So a lot of these relationship negotiations are best handled after sex. And you can let a few little frames slide. You can let a few little things slide on the way to sex if they make that process massively more efficient, because you know that in the future you're going to be dealing from a more powerful frame. And that's why I say this isn't really an online dating question per se, because in online dating, yes, you are framing yourself a certain way to an extent, but a lot of what's determined is going to be determined after the date, like after sex, and then to a certain extent on the date. It's not absolutely critical that you convey all these things in your online, and you don't need to be setting tons and tons of parameters to the point that you're so exclusive and you're weeding out a bunch of girls online. You can weed out the girls later in the process. That's the thing. You can always weed out girls later. You can't weed girls in later, right? So you want the top of your funnel to be relatively inclusive, and you want to not only get the girls that are definitely the type you want, but also the ones that are maybe the type you want or could be the type you want. And then you can always filter them out later rather than getting only the ones that are the type you want, but also excluding most of those because you're being so narrow. Okay. So don't be so narrow, and don't worry so much on screening and eliminating up front. There's always time to do that later on, especially in the case like this, where what you want is to hook up, right? So if it turns out that you have sex with a girl and then you wanting to hook up with her doesn't sit well with her, well, you at least hooked up the one time and you still got closer to what you wanted than if you had never met her. And so there's not really much downside there. If it was the converse, which is maybe you specifically only wanted a girl for a relationship and you would feel used if you had sex with a girl before, maybe then you'd make an adjustment. But in this case, there's not even really an adjustment to be made, because the worst case is she doesn't like what you're putting out there and then she stopped seeing you. And so you ended up getting what you wanted, which is you just hooked up. You just did it for less long. So in this case in particular, there's really a very little need to start, micromanaging it early on. All right, let's get to the next question. 1 second. All right, what do we got? That was from Ken, by the way, that last one. Okay, and the one previous to that was from Ryan. So thanks, guys. Okay, from Dan, we have, hey Todd, what's a good measurement of results, in parentheses, matches, online numbers wise, ratio of swipes to matches? I don't know, because I don't count swipes. That seems very monotonous to me and very annoying. I don't want to be like, I swipe, let me make a tally mark. I swipe, let me make a tally mark. Swipe, let me make a tally mark. On top of which is not even the most important factor. When I'm looking at my match ratio, I don't do swipes to matches for a number of reasons. One, that it's truly monotonous. Two is that there's a lot of things you can do, because swipe is not the only variable. There's swipes. There's what time of day you swipe. There's did you boost and swipe. Different things like that, right? How long has it been since you got on the app? Like maybe on certain apps, if you're swiping every single day, you do better. Maybe on certain apps, if you've been off for 3 or 4 days and you swipe again, you do better, right? So there's all these different factors. So what I'm actually looking at as my metric for matches is not swipes. I look at my metric in terms of time, like time invested per matches. And even then, now you have a lot of different strategies in terms of coming up with an exact ratio. So how hot a girl do you have to have her to qualify as a match? Like, so say for example, if you get like she liked you with a girl that's not attractive at all, do you count that as a match? Or if you're swiping and you're swiping on girls that you find relatively attractive to very attractive, and then you match with X number of girls, versus if you swipe more selectively on only girls you find extremely attractive, but you match with fewer girls, but just as many hot ones, is that a better or worse result for you? And so this pure numbers thing also is kind of a bad metric. But what I will say is that with a reasonable amount of swiping, like if you're doing, say, for example, a swipe and a boost once a day, you should very quickly, if you're doing things well, get to the point where messaging girls feels like a chore, right? So actually, this is an interesting thing, and this is something I'll talk about a lot in the later parts of the course is workflow, right? Workflow for dealing with girls online, and workflow for, by the way, course, by that, so for those who came late, by the course, I mean toddvonline.com. It's the online dating boot camp, where I basically take you by the hand, help you make your profile, help you make your photos, and then we work through 6 weeks of intense classes to get you better. And again, towards the end of that, we'll work on managing your funnel, because you're going to have a lot of girls in the funnel and you're going to want to manage them well. But what I will do personally with my own funnel is most of the time, if I were to log on to like my online accounts right now, I would have the obligation of a bunch of girls to message. And if I have a bunch of girls to message that are already in the funnel, that are already going well, I don't need to go swipe and get more girls. In fact, that's just a burden, because it's already going to take me like too much of my day to message the girls I have, or a lot of my day to message the girls I have, or, half an hour, which is a lot of investment for me. Or in a half an hour, whatever it is. It might take longer than that. But the point is, it's going to take some amount of time. And the amount of time I've allocated for online dating is already exceeded by the amount of time it would take me to message the girls. That's what I'm really getting to. And that's the point you want to be at consistently in your online dating. It's not the point where like, let me swipe and get more matches. It's like, I have enough girls to date that the time I set aside in my day for matching with online dating girls and getting dates, it's already taken up with messaging. And so what'll happen is you're not even swiping every day. You're messaging and messaging and messaging. And then at a certain point, when you've either gotten all these girls to dates or you've gotten all these girls to the point where, it's just not going to happen, or you're just bored with them or whatever, then you're like, okay, let me fill the funnel again. And then we'll restart the process. But most of my time online is not spent swiping for new girls. It's spent messaging the girls I have. And if that's the nature of your online dating experience, then the amount of time it takes you to get girls on the swiping is not really the most relevant, because qualitatively you're good. Qualitatively, you're spending most of your time on messaging, and that's where you focus on your added efficiency and that kind of stuff. So I don't know my exact ratios. I do encourage, it's funny because I do encourage in the course for you guys to measure your exact ratios. And I ask you guys to measure in terms of time, not in terms of swipes. But that's to get a baseline and see if you're doing well. And that's under the assumption that you're not filling the funnel up front so heavily that it's just not a factor anymore. At a certain point, it's just not a factor. At a certain point, your funnel is just full, right? And so that's the place you should be at, not in terms of a particular ratio, but at the point where like you're just spending your time messaging rather than matching. That's success in online dating in a qualitative way. Okay. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I'm gonna do one more question here. I find it hard to be cocky. This is from Jacob. Find it hard to be cocky while maintaining the flirty tone in messaging. Sometimes it's received as too arrogant. What are some ways to make cocky game come off better via text? So this is a hard one to tell someone how to do because it's very easy to get wrong, right? So this idea that you should be overtly cocky is problematic, because it's true, but not as true in practice. So do you want to be generally cocky? Yes. Does that mean that you should say something super cocky in your next text message? Probably not, right? And does it mean that you should do something blatantly cocky in general? Oftentimes not. The cocky you want to have is not the cocky of I said this one ballsy thing, or I said this outlandish high risk little thing, or did this little high risk maneuver. The cocky you want is like a subtle overarching confidence that comes through in every single thing you do, right? The cockiness is not in the crazy risks you take. It's in the subtle assumptions you make that underlie your mundane decisions. That's actually a really, really good point in game for game in general. Although I didn't probably say it in the best way, I think that's like a sentence you should, like, if you had a game thing on your wall, like repeat it on your wall. However, I just said that, right? Which is that it's not about doing an overtly cocky thing. It's about the subtle, like osmosis of cocky coming out of your body at all times, or coming out of your game at all times. It's the subtle pervasive nature of it. All right. So what do I mean? All right. So a lot of guys will have like a cocky thing in their profile. I'll be like, haha, do this and this if you can keep up with me and handle me. And it's more as like, hey, look at me, look how cocky I can be. And it just comes off like heavy-handed, obvious, blatant, bad game. On the other hand, there's the subtle cocky of when you ask for a girl's number, being like, yeah, I guess we can hang out. What's your number? As in, like, she's just won you over. As in, she didn't have you won over from the very start. You hadn't determined from matching with her that you wanted to meet with her, but she actually had to win you over. So that subtle implication that there was a winning over process is much more effective than the blatant cocky line that slaps the girl in the face with this guy's doing game. And so you want your cockiness to be in the subtle implications and the assumptions that underlie what you're doing, rather than in strong overt actions. Okay, guys. Quick reminder for you guys. So online dating bootcamp, I mentioned a couple times. It's actually 5 hours left. I did mention it's closing soon, but it actually is 5 hours from now. So you really want to get on that ASAP, like as soon as this call's over, or even just go over during this call and go check it out and then come back. You don't want to miss that. Okay. You do not want to miss that. It's going to close. And once it closes, it is gone forever. So get over there. And again, this is the most kind of personalized, interactive online dating course I've ever done. So it's going to be pretty extraordinary. I've already started on some of the calls, and guys have I've done the profile call, done the setting up the profiles. I've gotten messages back from the guys being like, oh my God, this is amazing. I've never gotten as many matches. I got dates this week already just from the first call. So it's a really good program. Get on it. 5 hours left. All right. Next question we have from DB, initials DB. Says tips for trying to game girls who are more introverted and shy. I find they tend not to respond well to things as the average girl. This problem seems to be worse online. Um, so anyway, and for my team, don't message me stuff about the setup, please. Okay, so okay, for girls who are shy, how do you deal with girls who are shy online? Um, Essentially, you have to understand that a lot of girls online are a little on the shy side, right? So it's not that like that's not true. It's not that outgoing girls don't go online, but the demographic of girls that are online versus the demographic of girls you'll meet out, it's a little bit shifted towards shy. So you should assume that the average girl online is a little bit more shy than the average in real life. That's a given. You can tell oftentimes from a girl's profile if she's a little shy. If a girl has a lot of introverted type interests, she's more likely shy. If a girl seems to be very timid in terms of like sexual things, she's potentially very shy. If a girl comes from certain demographics, she's more likely to be shy. And so, what I will do in my messaging, even from the first message, is I will alter the message to the demographic. And this is a really interesting question in terms of first messages: is should you calibrate the message to the girl, or should you write copy and paste messages? And there's definitely an argument for both. What I do is actually something in the middle, which is I do semi copy and paste messages. I have either copy and paste formats or a variety of different copy and paste messages that I send to different demographics. So I may send a different message to a shy girl or a girl who seems shy versus a girl who seems outgoing. But both messages may be a message that I've tested and seen worked in the past. So it's still a copy and paste message, but it's a lot more personalized. It's a lot more calibrated and catering to the specific girl than it would be if it was just a pure copy and paste. And it also doesn't come off as a copy and paste because it is on the nose enough for the girl. She assumes it must be about her because I clearly couldn't send that to every girl because there are certain characteristics or certain types of girls it wouldn't work for. So hopefully that helps a little bit in terms of getting things started overall. In terms of if a girl's shy in the general messaging, just you still need to move it towards plans, but just maybe move it a little slower. So typically, if it maybe takes you maybe 4 messages in total to get the girl from the first message to getting a phone number, and then maybe if it takes another like maybe 3 messages to get her on a date or something like that, maybe instead of it taking 7 messages with a shy girl, it might take 10 messages or 14 messages or something like that. It takes just a few more messages. You're just being a little slower in the process. You're going to have a couple more messages that are a little more logical in nature, a couple more messages that are just get to know you. But again, remember, she is online for a reason. And the fact that she's shy, she's probably more like, I don't want to say desperate, but more like she's been more deprived of dating than a girl who's more outgoing would have been. And so while she may seem reserved, she probably wants you to figure out how to set up a date with her even more than a less shy girl would. So understand that there's that counterbalance as well. Um, okay, so next question. Let's see. From Sagar. What are some tips to have a successful first date? I've almost never landed a second, even though we've had great conversation on the first date, but might be too platonic. This is kind of a longish question to answer, and there's a lot of guys have a lot of different mistakes on dates. The first thing I would say for this one is I actually did a video recently. I think it's actually on my main channel. The video that's up right now on my main channel is the most recent video. Is I'm talking about 5 very common dating mistakes. So I would say if you want tips to have a first date, go check out that video on the 5 most common date mistakes because I literally talk about exactly that thing there. But I will address this idea. So this is kind of funny. So this guy's having trouble getting a first date because he's too platonic. And for him, the path forward is very easy. The path forward, if you're not getting a second date because you're too platonic, is take more damn risks. Escalate more, be more man to woman, be more sexual on a date, because that's going to help you both with getting a second date in this case. If you're properly self-diagnosing, that's one thing. One aside, by the way, for any question you guys are asking, I always have to assume your self-diagnosis is accurate. And having worked with guys one-on-one and worked with guys personally, you guys' self-diagnoses are often awful. Like you guys are self-diagnosing really badly sometimes. So every answer here is with the grain of salt of assuming that what you've told me is correct. So assuming that this guy's issue with the date is that it's too platonic, which in this case I do believe because it's a common issue, but understand self-diagnosis is not as good as doctor diagnosis. But assuming that his issue is being too platonic on dates and not getting second dates for that reason, all he needs to do is be less platonic, because being less platonic is going to get him more second dates. Being less platonic is also going to help him get further on the first date. A much more difficult situation is if you're not getting a second date because you're being too non-platonic. If you're coming on too strong or escalating too much, and that's why you're not getting a first date, that's a difficult one. Or getting a second date, sorry. Because now the very thing that's making you sometimes hook up and getting a good result on the date is the same thing that's keeping you from getting a second date. And in that case, you need to do one of two things. You need to make your escalation more subtle, which actually will help you in both, right? It will help you to succeed on the first date and to get a second date. So that's a step you absolutely should take. And then a second step you can consider taking, but obviously you have to be calibrated, is you want to ask yourself on the date, where is this going? So you want to differentiate between dates that have a good chance of leading to sex and those you want to escalate more. And then you want to differentiate that from dates where sex is almost impossible. And there you want to focus not on escalation, but on building intrigue and chasing and the idea of a second date. And so those become two different outcomes that you can go for, and you need to make that distinction at some point. But the best adjustments in game are not the ones where it's an either or adjustment, but the one where it's an and inclusive adjustment. So between the choice of determining this is a sex date and this is a second date, and then acting accordingly, that's a last resort. That's a lower tier thing to do. Instead, taking the idea of how can I make the same escalation better? How can I make the same escalation less obvious and get the girl chasing me within that same escalation? Because that's going to help you on both. That's going to help you get laid on this date, and it's going to help you get a second date. And so that's the better move. And you should max out the use of that move before you worry about that second move, before you worry about that differentiation of the date going one direction or the other. So the more universal moves in game are the ones you should employ first, right? The ones that work in both cases, you should employ first before you start doing either or type moves, or ones where you have to like calibrate properly or choose the proper route. Okay. Next question from Casey. How do you respond to the "what are you looking for" question? So basically in this one, you want to just be inclusive. So what are you looking for is a type of question. It's a bad question to get because it's very hard to have an answer that like is so amazing it helps you, but it's very easy to have an answer that's so bad it hurts you. So this is the kind of answer, it's a kind of question where you want to be on the fence a little bit. And so generally the answer I'll give, and I've given probably hundreds, if not thousands of variations. There's probably hundreds, being realistic. But it's going to be something of the nature of, I'm not looking for extreme commitment, but I'm also open to something with a girl that I actually like. So something like that. And so what I might say is, well, I'm not looking to like, get married on a Zoom call before the first date. But on the other hand, I'm not, if I have a great experience with a girl, it's not like I would just want to like never see her again afterwards. So something like that. So you're basically saying I'm in this normal range that is acceptable to almost all girls. And you're defining the range super broadly because you're going extreme on both sides. But the point you're making, though, is that you're not the needy guy and not the clingy guy, which would be unattractive. And you're also not the super playerish guy, which would be terrifying, right? So I'm neither unattractive nor terrifying is the general message you want to be putting out there. And you don't need to get into too many specifics. You don't want to be in a dialogue, especially in text, where you're answering a lot of these types of questions. So it's the type of question you want to answer at once, be generic enough and give a good enough answer that she can emotionally move on from it, and then go back to having a positive, good interaction that's actually going to lead somewhere. So the main point with these types of questions is don't mess up and get past them on to the better shit. Okay. We have from Lucas. Hang on, I'm going to pick up my water bottle. From Lucas with the European spelling. Todd, can you give us some ideas of how to make the bio more polarizing, not so sexual it turns girls off and makes you come off as needy? These specific bio questions are really hard ones to answer off the cuff because the things that I don't want to do, I want to answer them in general ways, without going and in useful ways, but without going so specific that it's undermining to other people. So for example, the easiest way for me to answer this question would be for me to be like, hey, so I was on a profile call with a guy the other day, and in his profile, we wrote this. The only problem is that would be a disservice to my customer because now I just burnt his profile, right? And that's actually one of the reasons why we do these personal profile calls on the online dating bootcamp, is because I want you to have a profile is good and you can trust and will get you results. On the other hand, I don't want every single guy in the program to have the same profile, because that's been a problem with online dating courses in the past. I mean, even as guys come to me with their existing profiles, I've seen a lot of guys that have profiles that I know have been written by other dating coaches because I know who wrote them. And they're decent profiles, but by the time I see them, they're played out. By the time I see them, like too many guys have either done that exact profile or done that format of profile, and that exact style it's saturated the market, right? And so that's the problem there, is that I want to give good information, but I don't want to give information that's so specific that it's a specific burn for something else. All right. So in answering that, I'm going to try to hypothetically come up with an example, but you're asking me to like do the hardest part of the game on a live call without context and without it being about a specific person. That's the other thing in terms of coming up with these things for a profile. If you have a specific person, that's easier as well. So, for example, whenever I'm doing brainstorming calls, like again, these one-on-one calls I do with people, we start off by looking at what are all the things that are things about a guy that are worthy of bragging about? What are all the things that he's looking for in a girl? And I want to get his exact phrasing of them. I want to get the way he said them so that they're congruent with his personality, they're congruent with what he actually wants and who he actually is. And then we're curating the best parts of his personality down. And what usually happens is that we don't have to go out of our way on the call to be like, okay, this is polarizing and sexual, because when he's speaking uncensored, he's going to say some shit that's a little bit polarizing, right? He's going to say some stuff that's congruent with his I don't give a shit mentality, or his being attractive mentality, or his like unfiltered, uncensored mentality. And so that's where I get a lot of this stuff, is I get inspired by that, and then I'm able to curate it down into something really, really good, as opposed to coming up with it completely on the spot. So with all those disclaimers and with all that understanding, what was the thing here? Give us ideas as things that make the bio more polarizing. So what you might do to be more polarizing, but not make you sexual or needy. One thing you could do would be to mention something, but to mention it vaguely. So maybe you mention the idea of sex being important to you, or of a girl's physical, appearance being important to you, but you're not super blatant about it. So overly sexual would be something like, I want a girl with like a huge sexy ass, right? Which is totally fine in a way, but the problem is it's a little too blatant and overtly sexual, and it's a little too it's just going to weed out too many girls. It also might get you even complaints to an extent. So that's a little too over the top. And you want to make it something that, while it's emotionally triggering, it's not triggering in the negative sense of the word, in the sense that it's an immediate off-putting. And you want to also be within the range that the girl can justify logically whatever she's feeling emotionally. So a good general frame, I guess, this is a good one you can use. That this in one form or another will occur in a lot of profiles, will be something along the lines of your non-physical characteristic, your insert non-physical characteristic here, matters more than your physical characteristic, or you can even just boil that down to like being attractive or whatever, right? Etc. You'll impress me more with non-physical characteristic than you will with physical characteristic. However, however, physical characteristic is also important, right? So that's polarizing enough, and you're saying, look, you do have to be hot, but you're also saying it sandwiched in this context of I care more about your personality than just about you being hot. So it's palatable enough to any girl where she can find it attractive, and she can justify that you're still a good guy and not a total douchebag asshole. But it also sets a standard where you have to meet this standard. And it's also polarizing enough in the sense that you are willing to say, look, you do have to be attractive. I'm not looking for friends, it's a dating site. Right. So that's maybe a good example where you're saying something that is not hugely polarizing, but slightly polarizing. It's a slight risk. It's a congruent risk with being a high value guy. And you're putting that risk sandwiched in with some palatable stuff so that almost anybody can accept it, and they're not going to question the frame or get very offended by the risk. So that's maybe one good example. And I'd say that format of, your personality and looks both matter, but looks get you in the door, personality keeps you there. That frame, regardless of specific line, that frame is a frame that you will see, not in every profile that I write by any means, but you'll see it in a decent number, maybe like 20-30% of profiles that I work on. There'll be some inclusion of an idea like that in the profile. Okay, let's see. Next question here from Sam. Is it a good idea to put photos of you with other girls in your profile, or would that scare girls away or appear too try hard? And the answer to that is yes and no, right? So yes, it depends. It all depends on the exact photo, and it all depends on how the photo comes off. And this is also why I do sit down with guys and go through their specific photos, because there are a lot of guys who have photos with girls where the girls just aren't attractive. It's actually negative social proof. Or there are a lot of guys who have photos with girls where the guy is over in the side of the photo and doesn't look like the most important or most attractive guy in the photo, and he's actually like eclipsing himself with his friend. Or there are also on the other side, there are photos of a guy with some really hot girls, but it looks superposed and fake, and it's not actually social proof. It just looks try hard, and it even looks cheesy. And it's also possible theoretically, with if the girls are really hot, to have it be intimidating. Although I don't worry as much about that one, because if the girl is intimidated by other girls you're with, she's probably not that hot, and she's probably not the girl you ideally want anyway. So you may turn off some average or cute girls with that, but you're not going to turn off the hottest girls with that. However, there are ways to frame photos better, right? So a lot of times I'll, even when we're going over photos with guys, I will show guys, especially in these girl guy photos, I will show guys how to crop a photo or how to draw boundaries on a photo to make a bad photo a good photo, or to make a photo that has some of these social proof elements but is too cheesy or too over the top, how to turn it into a great photo. And so there are specific things you can do with specific photos that make them better. And again, that's why I don't just give generic advice on the boot camp. That's why I specifically go into your particular photos. But so the answer is it depends. Having some girls in your photo definitely can be great. On the other hand, having some girls in your photo, if done wrong, definitely can be a huge mistake and a red flag. And so it's all about the nature of it. It's not a this is good or this is bad thing. It all depends on how you execute. Okay, let's see. It says thoughts on age used on dating apps. Does it make sense to post a younger age if you're an older guy, or should you just be honest off the bat, even if it diminishes your matches? Says PT initials. So yes, the question of lying on online dating apps. Um, so I will say, well, first of all, I'll draw a distinction. There's a distinction between lying to the algorithm and lying to the girl. I am 100% fine with lying to the algorithm. I do not give a shit. However, lying to the girl is a little different, because the girl is someone you're actually building a relationship with. The girl is someone you're actually establishing something with. So, in general, if you have a hidden feature on the algorithm, something that doesn't appear on your profile, but in choosing that hidden feature in a particular way, it will get you matched with more of the type of girls that you're interested in matching with, I say, fuck it, go with it. Lie to the algorithm. Who cares? Lie to Tinder. But don't lie to the girls on Tinder, right? Does that make sense? So you're just basically trying to get seen by the right girls, but then with those girls, you're going to be very honest with who you are. And that's my kind of default approach to most things. You want to maximize the girls you're seeing. You want to maximize your optimization of the use of the app. However, you want to be a human being in the relationship. There are certain things that that you can think about changing, which is one, age, and the other is height. Those are two things. And the reason why you would change them is not because a certain girl would care, but because a certain girl might have thought she would care at the moment when she created her profile, and she might exclude you based on those factors. And then you have the choice, if you were to change those factors, to either tell her about them before the date or not, and that's really up to you. I will say, just from experience, I'm around 5'7", 5'8". I know years ago when I was doing online dating, I put on my profile as 5'10", and the reason I put that actually wasn't even because I was lying. It's because I had a doctor measure me wrong. I don't know how the fuck he measured me 2 inches wrong, but I had a doctor measure me as 5'10", and I figured I was 5'10". I actually thought that was my height. I found out later it wasn't. But so regardless, I did not know my own height. But regardless, 5'10" versus 5'8" or 5'7" is going to get you excluded by fewer girls on online dating apps. And I actually and so I left it on there because I'd just been 5'10" for so long. I just left it on at 5'10" because no girl had ever complained, and I just left it up, and I never even had a girl complain. The only time I did have a girl mention it one time, but she still slept with me on the date. So she met me on the date. She mentioned that I seemed shorter than whatever my profile, whatever, but she liked me enough. We had a good time. She ended up having sex with me. So clearly it wasn't as big a turnoff as all that. That's one thing. And that's mainly, again, for the algorithm and for the app and not for the girl. I would prefer not to have that. I'd prefer to have that in the background on the selection criteria on the app rather than something I actually post on my profile. And I nowadays, I would not post that on my profile. I would never voluntarily post a height that's wrong. I think that's a bad idea. But again, if you're telling it to the app but not shown and you could put a different height, I'd kind of be okay with that, because then you're lying to the app, not the girl. That's where I go. In terms of the age thing, it depends kind of what you're looking for, and it depends what you're doing. I know some apps allow you to hide age, which I think is fine, to just not mention age, because that's not an overt lie. If you were going to go with the age thing, I would try and be honest with the girl earlier rather than later. Like, so I once a girl likes you, once you're talking to a girl and setting up a date, if you're concerned about it, I would definitely maybe mention it there, or I would mention it on the date itself. I'd make sure to mention the actual truth to the girl before having sex with her, so she doesn't feel misled and doesn't feel like she was like there was any kind of anything coercive about the way that you went about, your seductive process. So I definitely come clean with the girl, even if there is a falsehood in your profile before having sex with her. I think that's important because again, truth and honesty is good from a moral standpoint, an ethical standpoint. It also, even from a legal standpoint, is something you just should be smart about and be good with. So in general, don't lie to the girl. And even if you do have a lie in your profile or a falsehood or inaccuracy in your profile, make sure you correct it with the girl and are honest with the actual girl herself. But in terms of lying to the app, I don't care. I'll lie to the app, but I don't lie to people. All right. Let's see. Next question. Oh, if I can open my phone, let's see. Let's keep the questions. I'm seeing some here that are not necessarily online dating questions. So I'm gonna avoid those ones. Okay, so assuming you have a bunch of good high value photos in your profile, is it better to use as many as the site will let you, or just a few of your best? So in general, there's a kind of an optimal range. You don't want so many photos that it's just like, you know, that she's gotten distracted from even the fact that you have a profile and distracted from who you are, and she's just flipping through photos, or to the point where she gets bored flipping through your photos. So you don't want that many. However, you don't want so few that she doesn't even know if you're a real person. So 2 photos or fewer is probably problematic. You probably want at least 3 if possible. Probably definitely more than 10 photos, it's overkill. There's a range. I actually recommend probably fewer than that 10 as my normal optimal range, but definitely over 10 is like too many. In general, within that range of 3 to 10 or 3 to 7, 3 to 8, something like that, more is better as long as they're equally good. Problem is, in practice, they're usually not equally good. Most guys have like 3 or 4 good photos and then like 3 or 4 mediocre photos, and they would do better with 3 good photos than with 6 photos that are a mix of good and mediocre. You're going to be judged as your worst photo. So if you have a bunch of photos that are truly equally good and truly all excellent, and offering and adding to the profile with each individual photo, like telling a new bit of you or conveying you as high value in a different way, by all means include them all. But if any of them take away from the other one, like let's say one is a photo of you doing a cool thing, but you don't look very physically attractive, that's detracting from your other photos where you looked physically attractive, and it might be a net negative and not worth including. So the real question is, with every photo, how does this affect how the girl's seeing me in relation to my other photos, right? So there's a photo that for one guy would be a totally good photo to include, but another guy already has so many good photos that it's actually a negative for him, right? So it's all relative, and it all depends on what else you have in the profile. It's all about what is the narrative, what are the general holistic things you're conveying, and what is the general impression you're conveying in the profile, and does this photo enhance that or detract from it? That's the real question you should be asking with every single photo that you add. All right, let's take maybe 1 or 2 more. Let's see. What are some good ways to end the date with a kiss if you can't escalate back to your place? God, I hate this question. I absolutely hate this question. Sagar, what the fuck? I hope this isn't the Sagar I know, because I hope you're not asking this question if it is. But this is a what the fuck question. So the issues with this question is, number one, you should be setting a date where you can escalate back to your place. That should not be a factor. You need to be setting the date with good logistics. That's one of my 5 mistakes in online dating video that I mentioned. That's one of the things. Okay, so 1, this should not be a thing you're dealing with. 2, ending the date with a kiss is fucking stupid. Okay, so it is true. And when I was early on dating, I did have a big problem with going for the kiss. And for me, going for a kiss was a big deal. And then when I started ending my dates with a kiss, finally, I actually gave myself a chance of success. So it's good that you are trying to at least kiss on dates. However, this Hollywood idea that the kiss at the end of the date is the optimal good date is a terrible, terrible idea to have. Sex at the end of the date is a good date. So don't plan your dates for a kiss, plan your dates for sex. And then make it an absolute bare minimum that you must try to kiss on a date. If you have a date where you don't at least attempt to kiss, you're going to massively hurt yourself in dating. 1, you might not even get a second date because the girl thinks you were too timid to even kiss, or it was too platonic of a date, or it didn't go well. But also you're giving yourself no chance of anything beyond a kiss. So you need to be trying for a kiss on every single date. And it shouldn't be like something that's at the very end of the date or whatever. It should be something that is just a given and occurs earlier on the date. And so you want to be escalating from the very start of the date and ramping up to this. But yes, you do absolutely need to go for a kiss on every single first date, except for, I mean, maybe if the girl's like a virgin from the most conservative ethnic religious background ever, maybe you can have a date without a kiss. But in general, you should plan on at least a kiss on every date and not at the end of the date, during the date. All right. So I do want to remind you guys, we do have online dating boot camp. It's closing in 4 hours. After 4 hours, if you go onto the site and try and sign up, it'll say countdown clock 0. You will not be able to get it. It'll be done. All right. So go get on there. Again, this is the most comprehensive and interactive online dating program I've ever created. I literally make your profile and photos with you. I literally sit on a call. I'll basically write it for you. I mean, like, it's not even making it with you. I basically write the damn thing for you. We do it collaboratively, but I write it for you. So you're going to get a good profile that is going to work. And then we also, after that, we're going to do 6 weeks of teaching you how to optimize, tweak, and improve that profile. Because as much as it's going to work, it's a first draft. It can still be improved, and we're going to get it even better throughout the following weeks. We're also going to work on your messaging. We're going to work on your dating. We're going to work on your closing. We're going to work on your funnel. We're going to work on every single aspect of dating. And I'm going to be right there with you the entire time. It's like a university class on dating that starts with a one-on-one intensive session with the professor, so to speak. So check it out. It's going to be epic. It's starting literally the class itself starts on Sunday, 2 days from now. That's why we're closing enrollment in 4 hours from now. So go over there. It's at toddvonline.com, toddvonline. Check it out. You're going to love it. You're going to appreciate it. If you thought the general questions and answers on this were even remotely good, imagine me dealing with you one-on-one personally, dealing with your questions specifically for 6 weeks, your profiles, your messaging for 6 weeks, and literally creating your profile with you and for you. That's what that program is. That's what it's all about. It's all about getting results. So again, it's toddvonline.com. Check it out. And with that said, thank you guys so much for tuning in here. I appreciated it. I'm enjoying doing these. Maybe we'll do some more in the future. See you on the next one, hopefully. And hopefully we'll see you in the online dating bootcamp. Again, toddvonline.com. All right. Take care. Good talking to you. See you later.